Out with 2022 and in with 2023, and with it, a new job market. And in this video, I'm going to break down what I think the labor market's going to look like this year and how to best take advantage of what's coming our way. But before we get too far into it, if you're interested in more career-related content just like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and you might also want to hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future posts. First of all, Happy New Year, and let me welcome you to 2023 and the great labor market that's about to unfold in front of us. And so far for me, it started off this year nice and strong because Penn State just won the Rose Bowl, so congratulations to the Nittany Lions. So I originally had plans to make an end-of-year video prior to the first of the year, but I actually ran into a bunch of sickness in my family, and so you just couldn't seem to get over it. So I didn't get a chance to make that video, but I'm finally feeling up for it now. Now, I'd say 2022 goes down as probably one of the most exciting years I've ever experienced in my career as far as the labor market, this whiplashing effect back and forth. Is it the employer market? Is it an employee market? And all of you have lived through this, at least I'm assuming all of you have lived through this. And we have seen just the craziest things going on. And as we first started off the year, we were in a major economic boom, and it was a employee-driven market. So employees were in high demand across just about every industry. Wage growth was through the roof. We were seeing people getting multiple offers, bidding wars, and especially those who were in high demand jobs, like I think tech and other places where they just simply couldn't hire enough people quickly enough. And unfortunately, this advantageous labor market seemed to come to an end very abruptly, almost as quick as it started. Not really that fair to the employee, but such is life. So this employment pendulum that swings back and forth, and I talk about this on my channel frequently, the pendulum was firmly in the employee side at the start of the year. We get to the midpoint of the year, and it's now swinging kind of to the center, and then at the end of the year, as we finished into 2020, the end of 2022, and now here into 2023, the pendulum seems to have swung somewhat drastically in the other direction. Now, this isn't for all industries, but I think in a lot of industries, we are seeing major corrections in the labor market, and in particular, industries that were really booming or job types that were really booming. For example, the recruiter job market has fallen off of a cliff. 6 months ago, you couldn't trip over multiple offers to be a recruiter. Now it's very rare to find a very solid offer. It's becoming a much more difficult labor market for them. And then of course we have the tech industry, which led the pace in this employment boom. It seems like the spigot got shut off immediately. In fact, I can't log into LinkedIn or read the news without seeing another major employer announcing a massive layoff. And that can be pretty disconcerting if you've been a job seeker throughout this whole process and you see this great labor market kind of come to an end, and now suddenly we're getting into a more difficult labor market. We also saw 2022 became the labeled job market, where it seems like every single employment movement suddenly got a trendy label attached to it. First, we had the Great Resignation, which happened somewhere in the 2020 to 2021 range, where people got tired of working these careers that were unfulfilling, only to look around at all their fellow employees being laid off, and they suddenly decided to reevaluate what they truly wanted in their work. So a lot of people voluntarily left the workplace. And that whole phenomenon was very, very popular for that period of time. In fact, everywhere you turn, there was another article about the Great Resignation, and I even made a couple videos on my channel myself, and that filled the economic boom. And then there was the rise of the quiet quitters. Quiet quitting has had a bad rap, and I think honestly, the term has been manipulated somewhere along the lines. Originally, when that term became a thing, it was about people who were tired of their jobs but didn't want to quit. So they literally scaled back to doing almost nothing but a mouse wiggle. I mean, it was literally you quit without physically quitting. You were still collecting a paycheck. And because employers were so desperate for employees at that time, they looked at it as any productivity was better than none. However, the corporate world kind of manipulated and morphed it into some sort of negative or derogatory term for people who are just working to their wage. So they literally seems like they changed the definition here to people scaling back from doing all this extra work just simply to doing what they're paid to do. And rightfully so, a lot of people have taken exception to it. However, the spirit of quiet quitting was completely different when it first started. So employers took exception to the quiet quitters, and then they started to quiet fire. So employers could nudge people out of the nest without actually firing them, and if they could get them to quit themselves, it would be even better. Then that concept turned into loud layoffs. And loud layoffs are people who are very vocal about being laid off. They'll log into LinkedIn and they'll loudly declare to anybody who will listen that they they've been laid off. The purpose of that, in theory, is to get more attention to their profile in hopes of landing another job quickly. Whether it works, I don't really know. However, I have seen plenty of people declaring that they've been loudly laid off. So the latest trend is this career cushioning, and I made a recent video about what it is, and you should check it out if you're not sure, because that'll come in later in this video. But the moral of the story here is that media loves these tag phrases, and that's been a big trend in 2022, and something tells me this is here for good. We're going to continue to see this throughout 2023. And in the spirit of layoffs, as we ended the year, we saw a lot of people experiencing very traumatic layoffs at very inopportune times, and in some cases, people were getting laid off right before the holiday break. And I even know some people who've been laid off in between Christmas and the first of the year. So talk about really crappy timing, and Happy New Year to those folks. And so what that taught a lot of folks, and especially those who were caught up in 2020 as well, is that there's no such thing as corporate loyalty. I'll probably talk about that whole concept in a future video, but gone are the days where you can work for a single employer for 30 years, collect a pension, and retire comfortably. Not only is it not realistic, but it's also not particularly healthy if you value your career growth. Now, it's not to say that there isn't a company out there that doesn't have good career growth where people have worked long term, but I'm talking about in general, across all industries, across all jobs. The idea of corporate loyalty is dead. The corporations are not loyal to the employees, and therefore the employees should not be loyal to the company. And this is where the concept of acting like a free agent comes in. I talk about that all throughout my channel. So if you've gone through any of my videos on career coaching, you probably already know this concept. So what do I think is in store for the labor market going forward now that we're in 2023? Well, if you look at labor market indicators, there is still some signs that we're in a relatively strong labor market as compared to the overall economy and the inflation rate. If you look at the labor market indicators coming out from the Department of Labor, there are still some signs that we're in a decent labor market overall, especially as compared to 2020 and historically. However, it's certainly not as rosy as it was before. And even for me, when I see labor statistics, some days it looks like it's all peachy and roses, and the next day it looks like it's gloom and doom. Probably has to deal with how people are interpreting that data. So I like to take the middle road. I don't like to get too excited in either way. And I'm going to suggest that we are going to be in for a definite cooling in the labor market. And it's already started happening at the end of 2022. I think it will continue throughout 2023. There's been a who's who of layoffs in the tech industry, and I think we'll start to see that spill over into some of the other industries that haven't yet been affected. And we are already seeing some of that happening now. I think there's some major layoffs happening in the automotive and manufacturing. I've seen some indicators that there's going to be some layoffs in banking and some other industries that are non-related to tech. I think it's a wait and see on how deep those cuts might potentially be and how closely they'll mirror the economic conditions as a whole. And I'm also noticing that there is a continued war on return to work. And I use the term war purposefully, where it feels like employers are demanding a certain thing and employees are demanding the opposite thing. And it's this great tug of war back and forth. However, there are a lot of corporations that are trying to force people back into the office. And if you've made plans for daycare or you've built your life around remote work, it can be a very disruptive thing to suddenly be forced back into the office kind of against your will. There are some companies that are continuing to look at hybrid models, but even some of them are being scaled back with a more emphasis being in the office than less. So I think we're going to continue to see companies waging war on this remote work, especially if the corporate culture was not remote first to begin with. And I think we're going to see wage growth slowing considerably, especially where we were 12 months ago compared to today. I think gone are the days where you're seeing massive bidding wars for talent. Companies simply don't have the stomach for that anymore. Unfortunately, it's not the same market that it was in the beginning of 2022. There's a lot more employees in the labor pool, and companies aren't fighting over employees the same way that they were. So I think it's going to be unusual to see bidding wars for all but the top talent. And I think things like massive signing bonuses and crazy perks are going to be a thing of the past. Just don't see companies offering that kind of stuff because they don't need to anymore. And I'll put an asterisk here and say this is not every single job. There are still some employers and still some industries where there is labor shortages, and there probably will continue to be so. But in general, across the entirety of the labor market, I think this is going to be a continuing trend. So if you're somebody that is laid off, or you're somebody that is thinking about testing the waters, what is my recommendation for 2023? I think personally, if I'm somebody that is considering a new job but is gainfully employed, I might hold off for just a little bit to see what happens as we go into 2023, into this first, second, and third quarters, just to get a feel for the market. I don't think you should be jumping headfirst into the labor market, even quitting a job without having another one lined up, unless you truly need to get out of a toxic situation. I would just play it safe at this point, and I think being cautious is probably a better strategy than being reckless. If you're somebody that's unemployed, your strategy should remain the same. You should be aggressively looking for jobs, making sure that your resume absolutely stands out and it's the best possible version to get a recruiter to call you. If you're not really sure how to do that, I do have a course called Resume Rocketfuel, which actually teaches you exactly how to stand out from a more and more crowded field. And that's going to be the critical thing to getting you those precious first round interviews. And then continue with your job search in earnest, and then really work on your networking. These are all things that you should be doing anyway, but if you're unemployed, you really don't have much of a choice. You have to continue to do it aggressively. So I don't think it's a hopeless situation. However, I do think that you should be aggressive if you're unemployed and cautious if you're not unemployed. So at the bottom line is, I guess you should be always career cushioning. And that's probably a good rule of thumb in general in your career, is to always be prepared and always act like a free agent. So that's what I think we're going to be heading in 2023. I'm anxious to see how things unfold. It could get a little rocky, so make sure you buckle up, get your house in order, so to speak, and let's see what happens over the next few months. Of course, I'm going to be covering any trends that come out on this channel. So again, if you're interested in this kind of content, make sure you hit that subscribe button and follow along. If you like this content, would appreciate that thumbs up, because it actually does help get this message out to a broader audience and helps me continue to do this for you. If you need more help in your job search, that is something that I specialize in. I do have a website called alifeafterlayoff.com. You should go and check that out. It's got all kinds of free tips and techniques on how to land your dream job. And of course, I've got my deepest and most intimate knowledge in the form of those training courses. We already talked about Resume Rocketfuel. And I also have Unlocking LinkedIn, which teaches you how to build those networks, which are going to be crucial and making sure that you career cushion properly over 2023 in a tight labor market. I also have a course called the Ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp, which is interview training, which takes you through each step of a corporate hiring process, gives you all the tips, the techniques, and the tools to get to that offer and negotiate yourself the best possible deal. And finally, I do offer some limited one-on-one private coaching sessions if you need a little bit more personalized help. All the details for that can be found on my website as well. Happy New Year, and let's hopefully make 2023 the best year yet. Like always, we'll see you on the next one.